The word crisis is not new to the travel and tourism sector. From 9/11 to the collapse of Kingfisher Airlines, the sector periodically faced upheavals that threatened to derail businesses. Largely driven by sentiment and fueled by disposable income, travel and tourism is generally the first to be hit when chips are down. From economic downturn to natural calamities, every crisis the sector faces seems to be the worst, only to realize that a bigger disruption is waiting in the wings. But there is no doubt the pandemic is the stiffest test it has faced in decades. The sheer size and the duration of the crisis makes it unprecedented. However, the sector may also be the most experienced to deal with it. Travel and tourism has been tested many times, and Deep Kalra, the founder and group executive chairman Make My Trip, says multiple disruptions have taught them the value of resilience. Good times won't last forever, and crisis for a business is, after all, sure as sunrise.
Thank you, Mr. Kalra, for joining us today, and it's a pleasure to have you speaking to us.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Fran. And
Great.
please call me Deep.
Wonderful. Great. So the first question to you would be, how has the last 6 months been for you and your industry? I think along with restaurant, I think you are in a sector which is visibly stressed.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the last 6 months have been the worst ever for the entire travel and tourism industry worldwide. I don't think just in India, I think worldwide. There would not be a single player in this industry which has not been impacted for the worse. Because the nature of travel and tourism is such that you have to go out there and you have to experience things. And exactly contravenous to what the pandemic is all about, where you need to stay in and you can't go out. I'm not that big a fan of virtual tours as some people are, so I don't think I actually think that they whet your appetite more and they actually rub it in because you want to travel and you can't. But jokes apart, I think the worst part about this pandemic has been that in India, the travel and tourism industry fundamentally exists of micro enterprises and small enterprises. So 90% of this industry actually has enterprises or SMEs which have less than 5 people employed. So very few people. We are talking about guides in far-flung places. We are talking about mom and pop shops, travel agents, tour operators. That is the bulk of our industry. The bulk of our industry is not what you see, the few large airlines, the few large hotel chains, and large, OTAs and companies like us, etc. We just form a very small percentage of the industry. For them, it has been particularly bad because they don't have a safety net. Sadly, in India, in terms of social security, there's very little. Yes, we can say, there's the Ayushman scheme for health insurance, which is definitely a positive and it has helped some people. But we don't have social security that if your business goes down the tube or if you lose your job, you get the support. Early on in the pandemic in April, I remember we were working closely with Niti Aayog, trying to formulate a scheme where the bottom of the pyramid, people earning say less than 20,000 and even 10,000 rupees a month, they could get some support. We were very hopeful, but now it's pretty clear that the government themselves, the coffers are pretty dry. So I don't think that support is going to be coming. So for these people who rely entirely on the travel and tourism industry to stay alive, for them it's particularly harsh. And India, as you know, has a phenomenal spread of places that people can travel to. And India had really started opening up for travel. So be it, shikara owners in Kashmir or guides in Ladakh or adventure travel in Northeast, there's nothing which has come. So, this has been a washout and now it gets too cold in these parts of the country for people to go soon. On the other side, if we look at the warmer parts of the country, there is some hope now. So I have to say there is some hope now this season that we have seen over the last couple of months. Driving trips have become very popular. So I'm happy to say that a lot of Indians are traveling out. All big cities are seeing resorts near them, and even a driving distance 5-6 hours from them are chock a block. So the last 6 to 8 weeks have been fascinating, seeing how people were dying to get out. So there are now green shoots of recovery. Domestic flights, 40% of departures, 40% of original level pre-COVID are back. So that's a positive thing. About 33-35% of people are flying. Again, I'm comparing to, let's say, just before the pandemic in mid-March, which is a positive. Domestic hotels have opened up. About one third of hotels are open, and occupancy levels would be about 25%. A lot of homestays have become popular. People are choosing, independent homestays because they feel more comfortable there. And like I said, driving holidays have become the norm, where people feel comfortable in their own cars. They're ready to drive out to open resort-like hotels or homestays. So while we technically have 14 countries that are open to travel to, there are still some restrictions. So I would say first 2 months, a complete zero for travel, complete lockdown. Next couple of months, little bit of opening, but really people traveling who had to travel, dire need or dire personal need or business need. And the last 2 months, if I break it up, definitely we are seeing recovery. And as a travel player, we are very enthused by it. A little concerned because don't want this to come to a stop suddenly and a clampdown happen. So I hope that people will realize that travel and tourism contributes 10% of the country's GDP and employment. Also, I think we should open perhaps with a little bit more caution. I'm a big advocate of testing, even if it's the rapid antigen test. I think if we insist on testing and make it mandatory for all domestic travel, it will mean a safer and surer opening. And it will mean that travel tomorrow, if let's say there's a lot of local transmission tomorrow in Goa, we don't want hotels to be shut down again. We don't want flights to be shut down. We want that to continue because that may not be the culprit, especially if you do the testing. So that is my humble plea. And I think I have been advocating that to the powers that be. And I think we are finding support. So we are hopeful that this comeback will be slow, steady, but sure. So we don't have to take 2 steps back.
Right. Uh, McKinsey has aptly said that, economic downturns are impossible to predict and sure as sunrise. This certainly means that, businesses have to understand the boom and bust cycles happen frequently. That would be a correct assumption, right?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. I think we've all become much wiser, by the way, about crises. But public memory is short. Let's not forget, we in our own lifetimes have seen many crises. In Make My Trip's lifetime, which is 20 years, we have seen 9/11. We've seen the dot-com bust. We've seen 9/11. We have seen the global financial meltdown. And we have seen Indian carriers have a lot of choppy days. So Kingfisher bust and then Jet Airways going down as some of the largest. So we've seen a lot. But not only does the industry bounce back, the company bounce back, people bounce back, travelers bounce back. I recall the time post 9/11, and at that point of time, we were entirely dependent on US-India traffic. So a lot of our customers were, based actually in the US and coming back to India. And a lot of people said, oh my God, we'll never get onto a plane again. Plane can be a weapon, etc. Let me tell you, it took all of maybe 1 to 2 months for people to be back with a bang. So human being is designed and by nature in their DNA have to travel. Someone also very wisely said, if God didn't want us to travel, we wouldn't have legs. Half seriously, but the reality is that it's in our DNA to travel. Everyone I know, their first question to me when we meet or we have a phone call is, when can we travel and where can we travel? So we're trying to, of course, answer that even through our platforms, the apps. But the reality is, people are dying to travel. Travel will be back with a vengeance. But I hope the lessons from this pandemic will not be entirely forgotten. Multiple lessons for me. As a company and as an industry, we've got to be more resilient. we've got to realize that safe travel is important to keep going. Some of these protocols we should keep forever. If we manage to use technology to be contactless for check-in, let's not change that when that goes away. We don't need that contact.
Right.
Keep contactless, whether you're checking in for a flight or whether you're checking in for a hotel. You don't need that interaction. Not only are you saving money, you're taking away a very big touch point of potential infection. It could even be a flu tomorrow. So maybe there's a lesson we have to learn out there. Extreme levels or heightened levels of sanitation in our hotels and our restaurants are very important. I think those protocols should not be forgotten. We should always keep those protocols because there are other germs which could be spreading, and the virus will not announce when it comes back. Or a new kind of virus, we will not hear about it. We'll only hear about it when it's already spread. As we see, that's the nature of the beast. So let's remember that. The third one is around sustainable travel and preserving the environment. I think what we have really realized during this period is that all parts of the country and indeed the world have become cleaner, greener, and especially, in the places where we stay in NCR, we were plagued with very bad quality air. We've all been talking about it for many seasons now. This year, we probably had the cleanest air ever because fundamentally, a lot of traffic is off the road. The travel industry and travelers should learn from this and try to preserve this goodness. Companies should learn that, listen, we now need to build in an insurance. Maybe we won't get an insurance cover against a pandemic, maybe we will, but we need to build in inherent resilience, maybe put aside, a cash pile for a rainy day, and also think about this new working model. Think about these fixed costs which we've managed now to cut fairly quickly, right? A lot of us managed to cut fixed costs quickly. One was about, people are chopping on rent. We ourselves, by the way, are giving up a good one third of our real estate, commercial real estate. We are giving it up as soon as the lock-in is possible. So actually, in October itself. And I'm very relieved because even when things come back to normal, I think now we have accepted we can work from home. And these are
Right.
the same managers who didn't like their people working from home. Today they're saying we can. And maybe there's a healthy mix. I'm not advocating all 24/7 working from home or never coming back to work. I think there's a big need, there's a social need, there are certain kind of meetings, particularly whiteboarding meetings, discussion meetings. But who knows what the right equilibrium is? It might be 3 days in office, 2 days at home, and making everyone very happy because you're saving a lot of time on the road. Of course, people can come in more. What about people who've got young children? They can be spend more time with them, or people who travel 1.5 to 2 hours each way and spend 3 to 4 hours on the road of stressful traffic. If 2 days a week or 3 days a week you can give them that relief, I think they'll be super happy and more productive. So I think we might have a better formula emerging, and we should not lose that goodness of things that we've realized through this. And the last one, which might even hit my corporate travel business, is that business travel will never be the same again. And I partially believe that. I think there again, people will forget and come back with a bang, but at least for a couple of years for two reasons. Firstly, fear of infection. So all large companies and MNCs are saying, guys, no need to travel, do everything remotely. Secondly, pressure on P&L. So look at the amount you can save on your T&E line, travel and entertainment, by doing everything online. Yes, there's some parts of the business which can't be done and people will travel. I think it'll take a good 2 years to 3 years even for business travel to come back fully. But leisure travel, it's coming back. And as soon as we have a vaccine or a cure, I'm a big believer in revenge travel. I think people are going to travel like never before because of that DNA. People are going to attack their bucket list like never before with more zeal than ever before. And also because we've all realized this is so temporary and fragile.
So, but you said you have faced, a lot of crisis in your career and in MMP's life. But what has been that one difference that you are seeing now? Is it just the sheer duration of this pandemic and the uncertainty when it will end? Or is it, the all pervasiveness that you see? It's hitting every function from HR to marketing to finance. What is it? What is it different this time?
It's a great question. And obviously, I've thought about that a lot. What makes this more different from the global financial crisis? What makes this more different is one, the severity, but more than that, the unknown. I think the real problem is, so when does this all end? As we all know, all financial crises in the last decade have been sharper and more frequent, but that means you've also come out of it pretty fast. So you might be terrible. You have a terrible quarter, and people spending is cut, etc., etc. We would still do okay because we were fundamentally a new way for people to book travel. So people were moving from offline to online. We were probably a smarter and a cheaper and more effective way to book travel. So a lot of people, we were anyway gaining on the secular shift, on the fundamental shift from offline to online. In this one, it's hit travel across, and you don't know when it will end. So that is playing on people's minds and psyche. I think the psyche has really got hit. Like you said, staff is working very hard. So I think our technology folks, product folks, UX folks, QA folks, and many business folks, and HR and finance, they probably have worked harder in these 6 months. At least the initial 3 months, I think people were flat out. Then stamina and then fatigue and boredom set in, but they're still working very hard, and keeping them motivated remotely is not that easy. But what about people who are in operations? When you don't have sales and and business is down, you can't create work for everyone. I think there's also a big fear factor and uncertainty that if it continues like this, could we lose our job? We had salary cuts announced right in the beginning. So we announced salary cuts, hoping to, tide over this with just salary cuts alone. And from managerial level, taking 10% cuts to the top level, taking 100% cuts. We went on for good 3, 4, 5 months. We now started restoring salary cuts. But people took those cuts, and it's not easy, right? Because there could be other needs. Yes, you're saving on not traveling and maybe transportation, but you're spending a lot more on maybe something else, maybe ordering in, maybe medical needs. I mean, no one thought that they'll need to buy all of these things as an insurance, etc., etc. So I think that's been tough on people, and people do tend to fear the worst sometimes. So I full empathy for them.
So this is the second time, once in a generation disruption that we are seeing probably in the last 12 years. For many young leaders, probably, this is the first real crisis. And then again, this is of epic proportion. What will you tell them? How do you hedge against such disruption?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Yes, it's trial by fire for anyone who's never seen a big crisis in the past. Also, for a lot of India, let's face it, from early 90s, it's been up and away. So many of us who graduated from college around that time, at least for me, I finished my MBA in 92. It was a great time to come out of college, to get a job. Everything was booming. Every sector was booming. Investment was, FDI was coming in, banks were lending, foreign companies were setting up, foreign brands were coming. So I've seen, three phenomenal decades in a sense, and it's been great. Even someone who came and graduated in the 2000s, even the millennials, they've only seen up and away. In fact, they have seen times where anything less than 6, 7% growth, people are frowning on it and saying, what's wrong? So in a way, you've been spoiled with boom time and economy opening up. But this is the reality. This is what happens in many advanced economies too. There are economies which are stagnant. Some of the biggest economies in the world, I know if Japan gets 2% growth rate, they are exultant.
Yeah.
So I think this is the reality, and welcome to the real world is what I would say. But it's going to happen, guys. So you've got to have business models which are fundamentally flexible and fundamentally lightweight, so that you can pivot if required. You can make changes. Please be fixated and passionate about your original goal as a young leader of building a great business or building a great career. Don't change that. But please be flexible when it comes to how to do it. Things will change. Technology itself was the biggest disruptor. Today, it's more than technology. Today, people say, what's the biggest disruptor? Almost everyone's going to say the virus or the pandemic. That's the biggest disruptor. But this will go away. But the rate of change of technology is anyway great. So in some sort of way, it's the same mantra. Be ready to change. Be ready that things will turn on their head overnight. And are you ready to take it? Also, be ready in a world where there's no playbook. I think someone rightfully said increasingly the past is becoming a very poor indicator of the future. And that's what's happened. So the past is now not going to tell us what to do. Everything is fundamentally changed, and we better get ready for this new reality. So nimble leaders, flexible leaders, managers who can think out of the box, and also I think people who don't get freaked out. So, another thing I think is very relevant today, we all are now familiar with EQ. And we are familiar that people are saying, hey, as you move more and more up, or as a leader, EQ becomes as important as IQ, if not even more. So intelligence quotient was always important. EQ is emotional quotient. And I think the third one, which has become really important and is AQ, which is adversity quotient, which is how well can you deal with adversity? Because that's the reality of life. Things are going to change. And how well do you react and deal with adverse circumstances when everything goes belly up? I think that's going to be the hallmark of a leader going forward. So for me, that would be the advice: get ready for tough times and get ready to build a kind of wall around you where you can take in signals, but you don't necessarily freak out. So you can filter them more than a wall, build in a filter where you can get these signals, you're getting everything coming in. But you as leader should not be the one freaking out, because people are looking at you all the time. If you freak out, then they freak out. They see your face panic, then they panic too, even through a Zoom wall. So be very clear that you will have to be calm in showing them the way out of this. If you're not, then I don't think you will get out of this so easily.
Right. Uh, is there also a need for, the leaders and management now to understand, the vulnerabilities with deeper ties to the company? The pandemic seems very good at finding that weak spot in your company and your business, exposing it, and then just exploiting it. Why I say that, is we've always heard people talking about leaders should look at long-term goals and look at, the larger things. Uh, does that also change now?
Yeah, I think it's a very astute observation. I don't think people think about it naturally, but we should. If every leader could now sit back and think about, so where did I get exposed? Was it because of our bench strength? Was it because I had many people who were very good when times were good, they could do, but hey, why is half my leadership team left me suddenly? They've left you. I think it's time to self-reflect. And I'm coming from a point where travel and tourism is one of the worst industries. I mean, in terms to be hit, it's terrible, right? Very happy to say most of our leadership team is intact and there. We've had some conversations with people. Some people have chosen, but by and large, the core of the company is very solid. Because firstly, as a leader, I think you've got to be transparent and honest. Not translate or transmit the panic, but you've got to be honest. Yes, this is serious. Secondly, you've got to have a plan, and that you've got to share that plan with people. You've got to say, this is our plan to get out of this. So right now, things are going to be tough for 12 months or 18 months. Here's our plan, guys. We're going to hunker down. We're going to cut all these costs. We've looked at it. We spent a couple of weeks. We're cutting fixed costs. Like I told you, even rent. We might even have to, ask some people to go, which we, after 2 months of pandemic, unfortunately, we had to do, which is the toughest decision to make. But it was more important that we keep our existing people who were working very hard motivated, rather than making everyone demotivated. So it was a call we took. Other costs: how do you cut back on marketing? How do you improve unit economics? How do you build a system, in our case, where you can remotely provide customer service without even having to come to office? So a lot of these things were done, and you communicate the plan, and then you say, guys, we are fine, even if this thing takes 2 years. Here's the cash we set apart.
So, banks undergo this stress testing. Do you think businesses can do something similar based on severity, frequency of occurrence, or duration of disruption?
Yeah, I think this risk test or the stress test. So banks have to do it because they deal with money. But I think a lot of other companies also, by the way, do it. And most of them are very well-established companies. They realize, because, if you do a risk assessment, after all, everything could be going great. But what would happen if this were to happen? Technology disruption. So someone, let's say, has built a phenomenal business around a certain kind of food. which now is getting growing kind of, importance, relevance, and people are saying, hey, this may not be that healthy long term. Just giving an example. And it had too much sugar when we were growing up. People didn't care about that, right? Now sugar's become like the new evil. So what is their risk assessment? Or, I'm sure companies like Pepsi and Coke think about this all the time. What if one fine day all fizzy drinks were declared bad, actually, or Coke was? And, nothing today is off the charts. It can happen. What happens in the candy industry or the chocolate industry. So you find everyone diversifying. Why are you getting into health drinks? Why are you getting into water? Why are you getting into health substitutes? I think every business needs to think about that. We never thought there'll be a time there'll be no travel. We did try to diversify. So, when we IPO'd in 2010, we got almost 90% of our revenues from flight tickets. And we realized that's not healthy. And especially during a couple of crises, we realized we are too dependent. Before the crisis, we were now getting 55% of our business. Before the pandemic, we were getting from hotel and accommodation. We built that literally from 5 to 10% to 55%. And we are a much better mix. And then we had, 10% of our revenues come from intercity bus travel today. And we're public, so I can share all of this. So it's a nice, healthy mix, but all of it is travel. And then we built in business travel some time back. So we never thought that there'll be no travel. Now we have to think even harder around that. We've launched an ad tech platform, which is leveraging our traffic on our platforms and to see how we can do something else, how we can monetize that. But are we thinking about diversification in a smart way? Absolutely. There's no question. We are thinking, but it has to be smart because cash is more precious than ever. And I can't be spending that cash on something today without knowing will it pay back easy. So it's a tough one, but yes, being diversified, I think, has been helpful today because some businesses have seen enough. Look at e-commerce today.
Right.
Boom time for them because people couldn't go out. So, on the other hand, even if you look at businesses like cab hailing, whether it's Ola or it's Uber, it's been a tough time too, but it's slowly coming back. So I think everyone is now thinking hard about, how can I build something which can kind of de-risk me in the worst of times, and we are no different. So we are thinking hard about it.
My last question to you, Deep, will be this is also my last question to you would be, this pandemic is also a test of leadership. What would your advice be, especially to young startups and leaders who are finding themselves in the deep side of the
Yeah, like I said, I probably touched upon this theme, and maybe there is something to learn. If I had the time, I would probably write it down and send it. But I think the first thing and the most important thing is to ensure that you have the inner resilience as a person, as a team, and as a business to come out of this. So the first thing, your duty to your stakeholders, and the most important stakeholder you have, even more than the customer and the investor, and I can say that on a public forum, is your employee. So your team members, firstly, you have to ensure that you will survive this crisis, any crisis as a company. You will come out on the other side. You might have to go underwater for a while, but you'll come out on the other side. And believe me, anyone who comes out on the other side of this will be stronger willy-nilly because most people, many companies will perish. So firstly, you've got to have that in your mind. Therefore, the how. So you need to figure out the blueprint, either alone or with a few people, ideally by involving more people. What is the blueprint of this? Thirdly, your past is not going to help you. There is no playbook for this crisis, and there will be no playbook for future crisis. So that's exactly the essence of being an entrepreneur. So an entrepreneur is not told you're going on the road less traveled. So you should keep that in mind. This is just an even tougher road. This is an even tougher path. The metaphor could be from a gentle trek. This is indeed a mountain climb at the Everest. So let's get ready for that. This is the river with lots of rapids and no placid stretches. So let's get ready for that. And fourthly, can you take your people along with this and your stakeholders, your team, your investors, and then can you go to customers and answer their new problems that they have? Their problem, what is a traveler's problem right now? A traveler's problem right now is, where can I go? Am I addressing that? Am I telling them, can they come to my platforms and see very quickly what is open, what is not, what is the quarantine rule, what is not? have I helped the ecosystem in making it safer? So we put in place these protocols with smaller hotels called My Safety. We've tried to get the industry together. I think one silver lining of the crisis is our industry has come together like never before in this. Airlines, hotels, tour operators, travel agents, tourism boards. I think everyone's really realized we are in this together. We will sink or swim together. And can we now present to them a safe way to travel? Can we make it a safe chain right from when you leave home? So is there safety and hygiene along the way, and can we communicate that in a proper manner? I think if we can do that, we are doing the right thing. Fundamentally, you can't change the tide. To expect 100% of people who were traveling pre-COVID to be traveling right now is foolish. But to expect that to open up in a calibrated manner, yes, that is possible. And then how do you engage your people and keep them busy and motivated when there's no business? So what we found is we attacked all those big, hairy, audacious goals on the tech projects, which we couldn't do otherwise. And we attacked those. So we flipped the priority order. The priority of projects typically was what is emergent first. And we did that, and the daily fires. Now we flipped it. We said, no, there's nothing emergent except remote customer service. That's done. Now let's do those tough projects, which we always push off for, because some work gets in the way. So we addressed those, and I think that was very motivating for people, because when they got out of that, they realized, hey, we'll always remember we built this in the pandemic. So if you're in a tech business, you can do that. There's actually those are the few silver linings of a crisis. So yeah, that's my bunch of random thoughts that I would give to younger entrepreneurs and younger leaders.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much for talking to us, Deep. Personally, I cannot wait to start traveling again. But again, thank you so much, and I wish you luck.
Thank you, Pran. And I can tell you, you can even travel now. It is safe. I've yet to meet anyone who's picked the virus while traveling for a simple reason. Your guard is up. Everyone's guard is up when you're traveling. I've done multiple flights already. I'm planning a road trip. And please go out there and travel. Travel safely. You'll be fine.